The price is too goddamn high.
That's a singular way of expressing a sentiment that's become all too common since Apple announced the iPhone XS and iPhone XS Max last September. So, are they? And if so, is that what caused Apple's iPhone pain this quarter? Welcome back. So glad you could be here. I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. Tim Cook was asked the question. He was asked the question directly during the Q&A portion of Apple's Q1 2019 financial results call yesterday.
If you look at what we did this past year, we priced the iPhone XS in the US the same as we'd priced the iPhone X a year ago. The iPhone XS Max, which was new, was $100 more than the XS. And then we priced the XR right in the middle of where the entry iPhone 8 and entry iPhone 8 Plus had been priced.
Now, I'll go over the historical pricing changes in the US in more detail in a minute, but so far, so clear.
The foreign exchange issue that Luca spoke of in the call and made that difference or amplified that difference in international markets.
Cook also brought the exchange rates up with Reuters right before the call. He said Apple is rethinking how it prices the iPhone outside the United States after largely setting the price in US dollars, which made the phones more expensive in local currencies as the dollar strengthened. In markets with currencies that weakened considerably against the dollar over the last year, iPhone price increases were obviously more, Cook told Reuters. And so, as we've gotten into January and assessed the macroeconomic conditions in some of those markets, we decided to go back to more commensurate with what our local prices were a year ago, in hopes of helping the sales in those areas. But that's outside the US. What about inside?
So yes, I do think that price is a factor. I think part of it is the FX piece, and then secondly, in some markets, as I had talked about in my prepared remarks, the subsidy is probably the bigger of the issues in the developed markets.
So let's just break all of this down. The original iPhone was expensive for its time, real expensive.
What should we price this thing at? Well, for 4 GB model, we're going to price it at that same $499. No premium whatsoever. $499. And we're going to have an 8 GB model for just $599.
And that was on contract. At that price point, it prompted Steve Ballmer, then CEO of one of Apple's biggest rivals at the time, Microsoft, to say it was, if not DOA, functionally the same thing.
In 6 months, they'll have the most expensive phone by far ever in the marketplace, and let's see, what's the expression? Let's see how the competition goes.
But if there's one thing history has shown us about Apple, it's that they're not afraid to change course, to iterate, sometimes in a big way.
You know, the iPhone started off at $599 for an 8 GB iPhone. It now sells for $399 for an 8 GB iPhone. And we want to make it even more affordable. And I'm really happy to tell you that the iPhone 3G is going to sell for $199. And that's for the 8 GB model. The 16 GB model, just $299.
On contract, which was the only price almost everyone in the US saw, at least for the first 9 months. Off contract, though, they were up to $599 and $699. Pricing for the iPhone 3GS stayed the same, and even though it contained the first ever Retina display and FaceTime camera, so did the iPhone 4. The iPhone 4S off contract, though, went up to $649, $749, and a new $849 tier. And that's where iPhone pricing stayed for the taller iPhone 5 and the Touch ID equipped iPhone 5S. I'm only focusing on the flagships here, not the experiments like iPhone 5C, which was an iPhone 5 in a colorful plastic shell that slid in under at $99 and $199 on contract and $549 and $649 off. The bigger iPhone 6 also stuck with the $649, $749, and $849 range. But the even bigger iPhone 6 Plus, which also had a slightly better camera, added $100 to the bill, making it $749, $849, and $949. iPhone 6S was the same again, but while iPhone 7 kept the $649, $749, and $849, the iPhone 7 Plus and its all-new 2-camera portrait mode system crept up $20 to $769, $869, and $969. iPhone 8, which added inductive charging, also added $50 to the pricing, going to $699, $799, and $899. And for the iPhone 8 Plus, $40, going to $799, $899, and $999. Then came iPhone X with its pricey edge-to-edge OLED display and a sticker price of $999 and $1,149. iPhone XS kept the same pricing but added a $1,349 option. iPhone XS Max followed the same formula as the previous Plus models by adding $100 to the bill, but only for the bigger screen. The camera stayed the same. $1,099, $1,249, and $1,449. Again, I'm sticking to the flagships here, but Apple also released the iPhone XR last year. It took over the old iPhone 6 Plus price point of $749, but without the usual jump to the second tier, just $799, and then normal again to $899. At the same time though, Apple retired the previous entry-level iPhone SE, which was at $349 and $449, and made the iPhone 7 the new buy-in at $449 and $549. So many numbers. Searing all that down though, we have the base price for the brand new iPhone going from $499 in 2007 to either $749 or $999 in 2018. And that's a lot, even though the price of everything from a movie ticket to a car has shot up considerably over the last 10 plus years. And what you get in the latest iPhone is a Star Trek The Next Generation warp leap over what you got for the first one. The difference in pricing is still a lot. From Apple's point of view, not that Apple's point of view really matters to customers, we're the ones buying this stuff, but for the sake of completeness, Apple's charging more for iPhones but making less. Gross iPhone margins, which are dumb things to look at as they discount pretty much everything but raw materials, they've gone from 74% for the iPhone 3GS in 2008 to an average of 60% for the 10 style iPhones in 2018, 53% for the deeply discounted iPhone SE. Gross margins, company-wide, most recently peaked around 43% in 2012, but were down to just over 38% last year. And some would point out that with all the new services revenue, which is traditionally much higher margin, it could be masking even lower margins now on hardware products like iPhone. So even with higher retail prices, much higher retail prices, Apple is making less money on iPhones than ever before. And if they'd kept retail prices lower, they'd be making even less money, likely significantly less. But again, who cares about Apple? This is about us. What Cook also stressed and has been stressing for a while is that the loss of subsidies and the exposure of full iPhone pricing has caused sticker shock, primarily in the US, but in some other markets as well.
For various reasons, iPhone subsidies are becoming increasingly less common. In Japan, for example, iPhone purchases were traditionally subsidized by carriers and bundled with service contracts. Competitive promotional activity frequently increased the amount of subsidy during key periods. Today, local regulations have significantly restricted those subsidies as well as related competition. As a result, we estimate that less than half of iPhones sold in Japan in Q1 of this year were subsidized compared to about 3/4 a year ago, and that the total value of those subsidies have come down as well.
While markets like in the EU have always trended towards full price, in the US and a few other places, most customers only ever saw that $199 on contract. But then T-Mobile started leading the charge to decouple device subsidies from monthly rates in order to make the monthly rates sound lower. And with Verizon completing the market transformation a few years later, everything changed. It was great for the carriers and the perception that competition was driving down prices, but what it really did was shift costs back to the vendors. Hard. And, full disclosure, I got a lot of this wrong. I figured it was in no one's best interest, not Apple's or Samsung's, not any of the vendors, and not AT&T or Verizon, and not any of the carriers to show those full prices up front. So I guess they would lean more heavily into the leasing programs, which effectively provide 0% financing on new phones and only advertise the monthly cost of those phones. Instead, they did both, full price and monthly price, maybe in an attempt to show how little the monthly price was compared to the full price, which again was good for carriers, bad for vendors, because the sticker, it really did shock. All people saw was that full price, glowing, pounding, like neon, like techno. Costs, subsidies, exchange rates, margins, ultimately none of that matters. Even if iPhone price increases were in line with inflation and the increases in quality and diversity of components and new features, and we factored out exchange and we didn't give a damn about the margins, it wouldn't matter. Pricing is an intensely psychological more than mathematical equation. In the market, perception really is reality. And the perception is,
The price is too goddamn high.
and as evidenced by Tim Cook's comments, Apple knows it and is working to change that perception. Trade-ins, for example, are being experimented with as a partial replacement for subsidies. They work for Apple because ultimately they get more devices onto the market, and that increases the user base, and that plays into Apple's new ecosystem narrative. More people with iPhones means more people to sell accessories like Watch and AirPods, and services like music and Apple Pay. Apple is also arguing total value now more than just upfront cost. From higher quality materials and manufacturing, to more capable chipsets, to performance enhancements for older devices, to free support and educational services from Apple Care and Today at Apple. Apple is making the case that when you buy an iPhone, you get much more than you pay for it, especially a couple or a few years down the road. This has led to some investors and analysts complaining that Apple is making iPhones too valuable and making them last too long.
We do design our products to last as long as possible. Some people hold on to those for the life of the product, and some people trade them in, and then that phone is then redistributed to someone else. And so it doesn't necessarily follow that one leads to the other.
But fiery Tim Cook, on the record, my absolute favorite Tim Cook, addressed that on the same call yesterday.
But I'm convinced that making a great product that is high quality, that is the best thing for the customer, and we work for the user. And so that's the way that we look at it.
Apple could also obviously cut prices by either using less expensive components, including the exorbitant amount Samsung currently charges them for OLED panels, or by removing some of the components. For example, there have been rumors that Apple would remove the 3D Touch module and maybe replace it with haptic touch, or maybe not with anything. Things like that could drive the prices down. Now, I don't think anybody really wants to buy a lower quality iPhone. We've seen that historically with the rejection of iPhone 5C, and even all the shade thrown at iPhone XR before it got into saner, smarter reviewer hands. If anything, iPhone X and XS show that Apple wants to make higher quality iPhones. And again, Apple hasn't been making iPhones more expensive. Apple has been making more expensive iPhones. A lot of the increased cost has gone to increased components, like that OLED display, true depth and portrait mode cameras, the A12 Bionic. Apple is thinking long-term here, not short-term. That's also what makes just cutting margins tough. I mean, it sounds like the best possible answer to most customers because it's Apple's money that gets lost and not ours. And I mean, screw Apple's money, right? But the market already downvalues Apple more than any other major tech company, and losing margin would be an amazingly effective way to bring even more punishment on them from Wall Street. More importantly, Apple attracts and retains talent, the designers and engineers who make the products, through stock incentives, and devaluing Apple stock is a great way to repulse and lose that talent. So Apple has to be incredibly careful with not only the levers it chooses to pull, but just how fast and hard it chooses to pull on them. Figuring this all out is going to take some really nimble, really out-of-the-box thinking, exactly the kind you can hone with Brilliant. In just 5 minutes a day, each Brilliant problem provides you with the context and framework that you need to tackle it so that you can learn the concepts by applying them. If you like the problem and want to learn more, there's a course quiz that explores the same concept in greater detail. Everything from algorithms to neural networks to machine learning to AI. These thought-provoking challenges will lead you from curiosity to mastery, one day at a time, in no time. So what are you waiting for? Go to brilliant.org/vector and finish your day a little smarter every day. Thanks, Brilliant, and thank you all for supporting the show. Whether iPhone pricing really is too high or not, that's the perception. Flossie knows it, and Tim Cook just said as much. Ramp up will take care of some of it. As OLED capacity increases, for example, and more high-quality suppliers come online, component prices will drop. Same with true-depth camera modules. Apple will always pack new features into new iPhones, but massive leaps forward like iPhone X will continue to be stretched out over many years, not every year. Trade-ins, if they become generally accepted, could mitigate against the lack of subsidies, but but so could the iPhone upgrade program if Apple could just break it out of the US, roll with it internationally, and figure out how to make the messaging less upfront shocking and more overtime compelling. If Apple really wants to get big into services, iPhone as a service is potentially one of the biggest, especially if it comes with other ones like music, magazines, TV games, and more, all for one reasonable monthly price. Same with making the case for overall value. Break down everything you get for every dollar you spend, including the longevity, the support, the education, and everything else. Don't just throw the price up on the slide. Show the value you're getting over multiple slides. And, of course, land on that sweet, sweet spot where people aren't just willing to pay what you ask, but are happy to pay it for what they get. That way, people stop complaining about how damn high iPhone prices are and go back to preaching how damn good iPhones are, period. At least that's what I think. Now, I'd love to know what you think. Hit like, hit subscribe, and if you've already done that, hit share and send it to a friend or two. It really helps the channel. And then hit up the comments below and let me know. And thank you so much for watching.